Writing style versus voice. What
Yeah.
are the differences?
Yeah, well, I always talk, what is the difference between character and voice? So a character is someone in a story, and they're going to have a voice, which is going to be a way that they talk. But then the overarching voice of a story is, more about the way that it's told, like the style and the voice in terms of the writing. And sometimes that is also the character's voice, especially if you're writing in first person or third person close, because you're trying to encapsulate what they see and feel. And then what was the other thing you asked about?
Oh yeah, so writing style.
And style. Yeah, they kind of overlap a little bit. I mean, the style of writing and the voice. Voice is really trying to capture the feeling of the narrator's voice or the character's voice or the way the story is told. The style of it, I guess, would be more like the way that you're writing the book. But there's a lot of overlap between all three of those areas. But when you pick up a book that has really strong voice, you're usually hearing the character and hearing the world. And every book exists within its own world. Even books that aren't specifically sci-fi fantasy, you're still crafting a world. Even if it's something like a thriller, it has a feel and an internal logic to the world. And it's not necessarily the real world, even if it is a contemporary story. Something like Gone Girl exists in its own world. I don't think those people exist in the real world. Those characters to me are very unrealistic in a lot of respects, but in the world of that story, they're all like that. And so I don't think that that's like a real world thing, even though it takes place here and now, but there is a specific way that she writes her stories, and that, she transports you into them.
Right. Hooking in the reader from the beginning. Mm-hmm. How is, I'm sure that's going to vary, especially within the YA world and the different genres that there are, whether it's science fiction, whether it's steampunk, whatever.
Yeah, steampunk, fun. I think hooking the reader is just so important regardless of what you're writing. I just think, for me, if I'm not really feeling a book 50, and I don't put a lot of books down, but 50, 100 pages is a long time, and if I'm not feeling it, and you'd be surprised how many books I think don't really work on that level, I may not finish it. And especially when you're dealing with more commercial genres, it becomes even more important. Younger readers, I think it becomes even more important. That said, I don't think you need to rush or sacrifice the storytelling to make it so hooky. In a certain respect, like I personally wouldn't want to do that, but I think getting into the story right away, having something exciting happen in the beginning. In my book, I chose to write a prologue that showed kind of what happened before when the surface of the earth was destroyed. So I told it from, if you can imagine, the president's daughter's point of view as they're evacuating the White House.
Oh, wow.
So young girl being evacuated. Because I did that for a couple reasons, but one was I wanted to have something really exciting and really relatable that happened right off the bat, because I think that will hook you in and make you want to read more. But there's other ways to hook somebody, like having a great character. Having central mystery is something I teach about a lot, which is, it doesn't mean that it has to, obviously there's a mystery genre where the whole story is crafted around a mystery, but that said, you can have a story that has smaller mysteries that are revealed in the beginning of a book. A good example is in the Hunger Games. They talk about the reaping, which is the big thing that happens right away in the Hunger Games, but they say the word the reaping 7 or 8 times before they finally tell you what it is. And you find out fairly early in the story, but still you're kind of reading like, oh, what is this? What is this thing that's happening? What is this big event? So I think that's another way to kind of get somebody interested in trying to figure out what's going on.
Too much conflict? Too little conflict? Do YA readers want more conflict than maybe adult readers?
I think that you have more leeway to do some bigger, kind of more epic, sweeping sorts of things, like what you would see in a Star Wars movie, for example. Too little conflict in any story or too little tension, and the story's going to be really boring and nobody's going to be interested. I think you need to have conflict and tension almost, if not in every scene of your book, pretty much in every scene. Even scenes that are character driven, I always think you want to look for how can you ramp up the tension in that, even if it's just a dialogue exchange. You try to have moments that are ratcheting up the tension. So a good example of that is something like in the beginning of The Shining, the movie. I also love the book, but the film, there's a scene where it's the mom talking to Child Protective Services. So you're learning information about the fact that the father may have been abusive towards the son, but it's just a dialogue scene. But the whole time she's smoking a cigarette and the ash just gets longer and longer. And you're like, oh my God, Ash, your cigarette. You get so tense for her. You're like, that's gonna fall all over you. And she doesn't. And it just somehow is this genius way of just keeping tension. So there's always little things you can look at in a scene to kind of keep the tension going. And then obviously there's big conflict scenes where there's a fight or actually something major happening or a major obstacle. But I think throughout a story, that's what keeps you reading. And people even be like, oh, it's getting worse. It's getting so much worse for these characters. And, you know, or even like a book series like Game of Thrones, you're like, oh my God, things are still happening and happening. But it's like, that's what keeps the story going. You know, a story without conflict is a really boring story. I think Kurt Vonnegut famously said, make great characters and then make bad things happen to them.
Well, if a book is not part of a series, let's suppose it's just going to be a standalone book, is the protagonist always victorious in the end?
No, and I think even in a, and you see that a lot, especially my book's considered dystopian, you see that a lot in dystopian series where a lot of times they're not victorious. And I always, when I teach structure, I talk about that where, you know, there's going to be a moment at the end of a story where a character makes a decision. They need to make a choice that really reveals their moral caliber. But that doesn't mean that the choice they make has to be the right one. A good example is Romeo and Juliet, right? Romeo does make a choice at the end, and it is a terrible choice. It ends tragically for him. He made the wrong decision. So no, it doesn't always have to result in a happy ending. And I think some of the greatest stories sometimes don't. That said, I think if you are going to go for a really kind of, I call it a negative ending, but an ending where the protagonist is not victorious, it makes your job so much harder in a lot of ways. I think you really need to pull that off because your readers are probably going to be a little bit mad at you to a certain extent. So I think it needs to have a compelling reason to have that sort of ending, or you know, a compelling reason why you wanted to do that for your story. Because we've all been there where we've seen something with an ending that we were like, oh wow, that was really dark. And like sometimes I love it, and even in films where, you know, classically a lot of that is focus group tested out of the film, but films like I Am Legend or the third Terminator film where like something really dark happens at the end, but then it's awesome. And of course, if you get into more like horror movies and things like that, then it's almost expected. Because a lot of times in those, the antagonist becomes the protagonist. So when we were watching Nightmare on Elm Street, right, okay, originally, yeah, maybe we're rooting for Johnny Depp and the teens, but at a certain point, Freddy is who we're rooting for. At a certain point, you're showing up at these films to see Michael Myers or, you know, Leatherface or whoever, Pinhead. I'm a huge Hellraiser fan, but you're showing up for them more so almost than who are the classic protagonists, and you kind of want to see them win in the end. And boy, would you be upset if Freddy was dead at the end. I know Freddy's dead as a movie, but he's not really dead.